These are the study guide answers for Unit 7, numbers 8 through 13. Starting on number 8, here's what we got. Number 8, if an atom is neutral and has 14 protons, then it must also have 14 electrons. Since it's neutral, you know that it's got no charge on it, which means that the protons and the electrons have to be the same as each other. Number 9, given that an atom is neutral and has 21 subatomic particles, that means protons and neutrons, in the nucleus, and has 13 neutrons, how many total protons and electrons does it have altogether? So what you have to do for this is, since you know that 21 is the amount of protons plus neutrons together, and it's telling you how many neutrons there are, 21 minus 13 gives you the protons. That's letter A. Number 10. Who am I? I have the atomic number greater than chlorine but less than bromine, and I have 4 valence electrons. Here's how I recommend that you do this. If you take out a periodic table and you find, we're looking for the two that were mentioned, the bromine and the chlorine, we know that it's going to be in between those two. So here's chlorine, if I can get it out of the glare. There's chlorine, and bromine is not far behind, it's right underneath. So we know that it's between numbers 17 and number 35. The next thing that it tells us is that it has 4 valence electrons. So what we need to do is we need to look in column 4. So in between chlorine and bromine in column 4, that has to be germanium, number 32 on the periodic table. That would be letter C. Number 11. Blank is a noble gas in the far right column that does not have 8 valence electrons. So this is the only one in the 8th column that doesn't have 8 valence electrons. That's helium. Since helium has 2 protons, it has to only have 2 electrons as long as it's not an ion. And everything else in this column doesn't work that way. Helium's the only weird one. So helium is letter C. Number 12. Nitrogen 14, this is now, we're talking about isotope notations. Nitrogen 14 and nitrogen 15 are isotopes of the element nitrogen. And also in the question it's telling us that protons plus neutrons equals 14. That's where that number comes from. It's telling us to describe how these two isotopes are different, how they are the same, and use 2 sentences. So in order to keep it brief on the video, I'm not using 2 sentences, but I am showing you the similar and different part. So here's the similar part. In both of those 2 things, they're both nitrogen. So that means that they have to have the same number of protons. Nitrogen 14 is nitrogen, nitrogen 15 is nitrogen. That means they have to have 7 protons because that's what nitrogen is. That's what they have in common. The thing that they have different is all about their neutrons. So nitrogen 14, since it has a 14 after it, that means protons plus neutrons, and we know that it has 7 of the proton part. That means the other 7 has to come from neutrons. Nitrogen 15, though, has 8 neutrons. It's got 1 extra neutron. That's what makes these 2 things different. So the way we talk about this is we say nitrogen 15 is a type of nitrogen. It's an isotope of nitrogen. For number 13, it says explain how the following terms are related: atomic number, isotope, and mass number. Here is my definition. All isotopes of carbon, I'm using an example, all isotopes of carbon have the same atomic number. That's the number on the top. It tells you the protons. But they have different mass numbers. So here's my example. I've drawn a little sketch of the square from the periodic table. All isotopes of carbon, remember that means types of carbon, will all have the same atomic number. That's the 6 on the top. But every isotope of carbon will have different mass numbers. So if I write carbon 12, this is the mass number for that isotope. If I write carbon 14, that's the mass number for that isotope.